scoot closer. Oh, it's so far away.
Howdy.
Lost the pastor.
Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Friday, August 26, 2022. I'm Therese Garnier sitting in for Roland today. And here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on Black Star Network. An Alabama pastor arrested while watering a neighbor's flowers has filed a discrimination lawsuit against the Childersburg Police Department. Michael Jennings and one of his attorneys are here tonight. Attorneys for a Black Texas man say a Beaumont police officer body slammed his client head first on a cement floor, leaving him paralyzed. The attorney for Christopher Shaw will join me tonight to discuss this tragic case. And y'all remember the Black Mississippi FedEx driver who got shot at by a white man while trying to deliver a package? Well, now he's getting death threats, and the men charged in the shooting have yet to be prosecuted. Also, the DOJ releases the redacted version of the Mar-a-Lago search warrant affidavit today. National security and foreign policy expert Dr. Nola Haynes will explain what's in the document and why there's probable cause for the search. Also, we'll introduce you to the youngest female private pilot license holder. Man, that is a tongue twister. Talk about black magic. I love it. You're going to love her story as well. Also, in our Education Matters segment, we will talk to one researcher who breaks down the numbers and explains if we really do have a teacher shortage across the U.S. Well, guess what time it is? It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
An Alabama pastor thought he was doing the right thing when one of his neighbors asked him to take care of their plants while they were out of town. Well, that neighborly task landed Pastor Michael Jennings in jail. Here's how it all went down.
Hey man, how's it going? Pretty good. What you doing here, man?
Water flower.
All right, they saying that, is that your vehicle? It's not?
It's the neighbor's vehicle.
The neighbors?
314, I'll be on 13.
Okay.
10-4.
You live here?
No, I don't live here.
Okay. They saying that this vehicle is not supposed to be here and you're not supposed to be
Who's
here.
saying that?
They called about it. I don't know who called.
I'm supposed to be here. I'm Pastor Jennings. I live across the street.
You're Pastor Jennings?
Yes, I'm looking out for their house while they gone.
Okay.
Watering their flowers.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Now, do you have like ID and all?
Oh, no, man. I'm not going to give you no ID.
Why not?
I ain't did nothing wrong. And they did
Well,
nothing
you look,
suspicious.
listen, I'm not saying do nothing wrong.
Doc, listen,
There's a suspicious person.
Look, I used to be a police officer in Goodwater. Don't come here with that. Okay?
Look, man, don't do this to me.
Yeah.
There's a suspicious person in the yard, and if you're not one to identify yourself.
I don't have to identify myself. It's not a stop and identify state. That guy know me. He came to my store that got broke in. I live right over there across the street. Who called y'all?
That's what we got to figure out. But first,
who called you?
You live
black
here?
Man
He
out
don't
here
live here.
warning his neighbor problem. You think
I'm not saying nothing
illegal.
about.
You have no right to approach me if I ain't did nothing suspicious or nothing wrong. Told him I'm a pastor. I pastor until I don't want to hear.
Sir.
You want to lock me up? Lock me up.
Nobody wants to
lock me up. I'm not showing y'all anything. I'm going to continue to water these flowers. I don't care who called y'all. Lock me up and see what happens. I want you to.
Hey, man, just come here and talk to us.
I'm going to water these back flowers is what I'm going to do. All right, who called y'all?
Well, if you would let us talk to you, we can figure stuff out.
You know, you're going to catch an obstruction charge if you keep walking away.
You can do whatever you want. Do it. Do it.
We're just trying to talk to you, man. Come here.
313, 314, follow.
10-4. We got one that's not listening to us. Look, man, let me see your phone. Let me see your phone, dude. Just calm down, okay?
No.
Stop.
I like this.
Okay. We're just trying to talk to you and see.
I don't want to argue with you, okay?
All right, go ahead and do what you got to do, Doc. Do what you got to do. Go on and lock me up.
Look, just have a seat.
It's already
not
a
locked
lawsuit.
up. You're
It's
just
already a lawsuit,
Yes,
Doc.
sir. Yes, sir.
It's already a lawsuit.
Just have a seat, okay?
Okay, already a lawsuit.
Pastor Michael Jennings and one of his attorneys, Joy Travis, joins us from Alabama. I am so sorry that you had to experience this and go through this. I mean, you literally just showed up to do a neighborly favor. You were watering their flowers. I don't know how suspicious that can be, but someone thought it was suspicious and called the police. When you were watering the flowers and they first approached you, what was going through your mind?
Well, I kind of knew when he pulled up, he pulled around back instead of pulling in the front. I knew then that it was going to be something to it. He pulled around back, then walked around front as though he was going to sneak up on me or catch me doing something. And he began, the way that he started asking his questions, you supposed to be here. What are you doing here? I think that could have been handled another way,
And what was going through your mind? Because you did state that you were in law enforcement earlier in life. So what was going through your mind? Were you anxious? Were you
No, I
feeling?
kind of let him know that I knew the law and what he was doing was wrong. He was actually trespassing, and he wanted ID, and I wasn't gonna give him no ID, which I didn't have ID on me. But I know once they get you in the system, they'll put it down as burglary, suspicion of burglary, or something like that, and you're in the system once they get that ID and call it in, whether you're guilty or not.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you said that you told officers you had a background in law enforcement and that you did not have to produce your identification because you had not committed a crime. So what did they tell you their reasoning was for arresting you? Was it because you wouldn't show them your ID?
Well, if you look at the video, you'll see that after they questioned me and they took me around back, that's when they arrested me, when I went around back. One of the officers came up. They was trying to talk to me. One of the officers came up yelling. And this part, you could probably don't hear it. He came up yelling, telling me, shut up, you talk too much. And once he said that, I said, you don't talk to me like that, boy. I'm a full-grown man. And you can hear Officer Smith saying 10-15, me go ahead on and arrest. So I don't think it was just about the ID. I think it's also because they got angry because I talked back to them.
Goodness, yeah, because that's definitely a crime for sure. Let's go on ahead and bring our panelists in because I'm sure they have plenty of questions for you. Joining us today, we have Kelly Bethea, JD Communications strategist. We also have Michael Imhotep, the host of American History Network. And we also have Xavier Pope, the host of Suit Up News Owner and the Pope Law Firm. Thank you all for joining us. Let's go on ahead and have Imhotep chime in. Do you have any questions or thoughts on this entire ridiculous situation?
Hey, well, thanks for coming on, Pastor Jennings and attorney. I saw the story that Good Morning America did on this situation yesterday. So, number one, I'm glad that you're still alive. Number one, because in Alabama, this could have gone a different way with all-white police officers.
Yes.
In the story that Good Morning America did, they stated that in the state of Alabama, out in public, the police have the right to ask for ID, but on private property, it appears based upon Alabama state law, that does not apply. So is that what you were following when you said that you didn't have to give them ID because you were on private property?
Yes, and they was actually trespassing, and I knew they didn't have no right to get my ID at that time, and I already had identified myself. And if they wanted to know who I was, they could just walk across the street. They could have ran my tags or got my ID from my wife. When they asked the neighbor for her ID, the one that actually called the police on me, she said she would not give it. And then she wouldn't give them her last name. So they went and ran her tag to get her ID. Neither did they.
And just one quick follow-up, because they didn't show that portion here in this video. There was a white female neighbor who called the police. You knew the white female neighbor. She came over, and the police automatically took her word for what happened, but didn't take your word for what happened, okay? In the story from Good Morning America, they said that the police still arrested you even after the white neighbor exonerated you, and then a month later, the charges were dropped. Can you or the attorney explain why did the police still arrest you after the neighbor came over and said, I'm the one that called, I know who he is, he lives across the street, she exonerated him? Can anybody explain that?
Mr. I would like to explain.
I think that's where this is so egregious, because that is the point. He was exonerated. The young lady said that she made a mistake, that he is a neighbor, and confirmed. There was no probable cause of any type know that there was anyone that was any type of danger. And so this actually is where the irony comes in. This young lady who is the person who called the police actually told the police, I made a mistake. But even with that, they did not require her to give identification. They took her word for it. And even after she told the police, yes, this is someone that lives here or a neighbor, they still continue to arrest him. That is where the problem lies for us. Because they got the confirmation that they needed that Reverend Jennings was not a threat, but yet they still decided to take him to jail and book him and charge him with these charges. Even after that communication, Reverend Jennings, Pastor Jennings' wife brought his ID, and they still refused to release him or acknowledge that, you know, he is who he was. And we see the first thing in the video, within the first 10 seconds, he says, I'm Pastor Jennings, I stay across the street. You know, that's the question. Why did they continue to press forward with these charges when there was nothing being done and we're on private property? There's no issue here as far as anything that's a crime being committed.
All right, let's go to our next panelist, Xavier.
Pastor Jenkins, my heart goes out to you.
Jennings.
Minding your own business, doing something fine for a neighbor, and you have a neighbor that's not neighborly. Is there any reason why the woman that called the police on you all of a sudden did not recognize you? And what was your relationship with her? Is there any reason what would prompt her to do what she did? And then kind of waffle back and forth whether you were quote unquote allowed to water the lawn of the neighbor. And then another question as to in terms of why would the police would even assume that if you are not in a vehicle, that you're across the street watering a lawn, that you would even have ID on your person in the first place?
To answer your first question, the neighbor said she looked through the fence and she just seen and heard somebody over there. She could have walked around the side and seen that it was me. But a matter of fact, we didn't have any bad relations. She had invited me to come over to celebrate her son's graduation. They were going to have a little thing, get together in the yard that same week. But she acknowledged that, hey, it's my fault. You know, she didn't walk around and look to see if who I said I was. And the suspicion, I believe their suspicion was that when the officer walked up, that I was getting ready to commit a burglary. And the neighbor had told them that that vehicle didn't belong there. And I don't know how she didn't know that, because they drive that vehicle every day right in front of their house. And I think they were suspicious of me having a vehicle there, that I was committing a burglary. And that's why they kept asking me, if that's your vehicle, it don't belong here. And I didn't know my neighbor's last name. I just knew Mr. Roy and Miss Connie. So I guess they thought that was suspicious. But
I actually have a question for Attorney Travis. Now, it's stated that after this incident occurred that the charges were dropped. So legally, is that kind of an admittance of them doing something wrong? Is that their way of admitting, yeah, we messed up, so we're dropping this? Can you kind of explain a little bit about that?
Well, of course, you know, that is our interpretation, because how often is someone arrested and then just charges just dismissed and dropped? So it is our assumption that that is an action of them showing that they were wrong. But I think that they knew that this got way out of hand and shouldn't have gone that way. So we do believe that that is an admission of guilt. We have not had any statement or communication from the city or the police officers, the mayor, the chief of police. We have not heard anything from them as far as a response regarding that. So that is our assumption, and that's why we are moving forward with filing a federal lawsuit because Pastor Jennings' rights were violated.
Kelly, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm glad that you are alive, Mr. Jennings, because that is a harrowing ordeal. When we hear stories like this, usually the pushback is the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. He should have just given the ID. He should have just done this, should have just done that. Why didn't he comply, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you are a former law enforcement officer. You are a pastor. You are minding your business. And it doesn't matter how amenable you are to officers' instructions or not, it always feels like you're in a catch-22. Meanwhile, the person who made the phone call and made the mistake gets off scot-free. So my question to you is, how do you feel about, you know, the talks now of possible ramifications for people who make this mistake of calling before doing their due diligence and making sure that the person is supposed to be where they're supposed to be?
Well, I think people like that should investigate. And one thing, if people just mind their own business in a lot of situations, a lot of these things wouldn't arise. And for us complying, you know, it doesn't matter if anybody know the history of Alabama and the greatest civil rights thing in Alabama. It doesn't matter if you do comply. You know, NBC just did a report. 61% of blacks that comply are still disrespected. You know, so it really don't matter if you comply. You can crawl, you can lay down, and you can end up like George Floyd. It don't matter if you comply. They feel like they're in control and they're going to do what they want to do. And I think because of the fact that I talked back, that made them more angry than anything. But they're supposed to be public servants, you know, to serve and to protect.
Attorney Travis, is there anything moving forward? What's next?
Well, of course, we are preparing to draft and file in federal court because this is a blatant violation of our client's constitutional rights. You know, we haven't heard anything back from the city at this point. We have not made communication with them or tried to make contact. But we are just preparing to move forward to try to get justice for Pastor Jennings, because what happened should not have happened. You know, there are a lot of things that could have been done differently. Things like training that could help in these situations that we continue to see day after day that are happening in not just Alabama. Training to police officers. You know, there was a question about holding the neighbor accountable. You know, I'm not sure what can be done as far as that, but there needs to be something done so that we can have people think a little bit harder about just making allegations about things that they don't know about. Pastor Jennings said it perfectly, to just people to keep in keep to themselves. But we are just preparing to amp things up to draft and file this complaint. We've got a lot of response from citizens across the country, you know, that are just really upset with this. So there could potentially be some type of effort to show support for Pastor Jennings in public. And so we are looking towards what that may look like. But at this point, we are just trying to make sure Pastor Jennings is able to cope, because every time this video is played, you know, I'm sure it evokes some type of trauma from the experience of this that did not have to occur. So right now, we are just trying to make sure Pastor Jennings has the stability that he needs so that he can continue to be a resident in his community that helps others, and make sure that this does not happen again in his community or anywhere else.
And Pastor, do you have any fear for your safety? Do you have any concerns that now that you're coming out with this story that you may face some backlash?
Well, not concerning the story coming out, but I had a lot of my friends who are Caucasians come and tell me just be careful, because the city have killed 3 black men. They shot a 14-year-old in the back. They shot another one in the head, and they killed a guy at a gas station. They have killed 3 black men in this city over the past 30 years. So they was letting me know, just be careful, watch your back. They was concerned about me. And when my wife went to visit in Florida, when I was here alone, I started thinking, it was kind of a little bit of a paranoia. I started putting a chair behind my door. I armed myself, because I know that anything can happen. So it makes you think. It gives you a little paranoia.
You know, and it's sad that these kind of cases seem to keep happening. We had a guest on yesterday who spoke about she was just cutting her lawn and she had to deal with some issues of racism. And it goes to show that it makes you question whether you should be nice and do nice things for people, because here it is, you're doing a good deed for someone, literally just watering someone's flowers, and this is the end result. And so it almost makes you feel like or at least myself, wonder, like, should we keep doing nice things for people because this is what happens, this is how you're rewarded. Again, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this, but I appreciate you joining us and sharing your story. I also appreciate the questions from all the panelists as well, but we do have to cut to a break. But for those of you watching, don't go anywhere. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered on Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20036-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
It's Kiara Sheard.
Hey, I'm Taj.
I'm Coco.
And I'm Lily. And we're SWV.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. I'm Therese Garnier sitting in for Roland. Now, for those of you who are just now tuning in, we were talking a little bit earlier about a pastor in Alabama who his neighbors asked him, hey, while we're out of town, can you please water our plants? And he goes, of course, sure, I'd love to. And as he's watering these plants, he ends up getting arrested. And so I kind of want to bring in our panelists to discuss it a little further because this situation is just so absurd. And I know we had to cut to a break a little earlier. So I want to bring it over to Kelly and kind of get some of your thoughts on some of the repercussions of this and maybe some of the things that can result from this situation, how people may feel about doing kind acts for others, etc. So what are your thoughts, Kelly?
I think it goes beyond just, the notion of we can't be good Samaritans to our neighbors anymore. I think it is an attack on our humanity and how we are to function in the world as a whole altogether, because he was literally just watering flowers. The hose is in his hand. The garden is right there. The water's in the hose. He's spraying the bushes. And the fact that those police officers still saw him as a threat simply because of the color of his skin and the trust that they had in a woman of their colored skin that they did not even know, that is absurd. That is literally a stripping away of one's humanity when you think that someone doing something so humane and innocent is a threat just because they look different from you. So my concern goes beyond whether you can water your grass while Black or whether you're driving while Black. Can you even be Black in this country without being perceived as a threat? And right now, as of August 26, 2022, the answer is no. And that is unfortunate.
Well put, well put. Xavier, any thoughts?
The pastor said, this is going to be a lawsuit. We see a lawsuit. But how many times can these lawsuits be brought and taxpayers continually pay into these matters and nothing is actually done about the criminality of using the police system as an act of domestic terrorism against African-American and brown people, and B, police officers using the color of law to be able to enforce and harass African-American citizens. This is absurd. I mean, to anyone, they immediately walk up to him and immediately assume his criminality. Hey, what are you doing? The man was calmly watering plants. And we've seen other issues with people killed in their own backyard. People should be able to sleep in their own beds, run on a path of their own choosing, drive in their cars, be where they're supposed to be. That people's public safety should not be in danger just doing mundane activities. And what we see here is be a good neighbor. He was being a good neighbor. She should have been a good neighbor by walking by, say, hey, how you doing? If you automatically assume criminality of a Black person and put his life in jeopardy. So I'm so glad one of the panelists talked about, I'm glad that you're alive. And it's unfortunate we have to start a conversation worrying about if someone is even alive by their interaction, mundane, with police.
Michael, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I saw the story on this yesterday on Good Morning America. They did a really good job of it, and I read about this as well. It's a few things. Number one, he was charged with obstructing government operations. After his white neighbor came over and exonerated him, and the police did not ask for her ID, and they believed her, they still arrested Pastor Jennings. And he was arrested on obstructing government operations. And then a month later, the charges were dropped. So, and one of the things they said was in the story, they said that because they arrested him, they could not unarrest him after he was exonerated, which doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, okay, she explained, she's the one that called. She made a mistake. She actually said, I did not know, in the video, she actually said, I did not know that was him because she knew who he was. Pastor Jennings tells her, you're all right. He basically accepts her apology, okay? And she said he lives across the street. So why is he still being charged, and why does it take a month to drop the charges? Okay, so, this is, the whole thing is really weird. And then you had now this whole thing could have gone like a whole nother direction. I mean, there was one officer, he said, was off camera. You couldn't hear him, who yelled at him. The other officers, even though I think they went too far, they should let them go. I think they kept it really from escalating how it could have escalated if you had some other officers that were not level-headed, okay? Because you're in Alabama, all right? And I mean, that's where Bloody Sunday took place, in Alabama. So, once again, he's lucky he's still alive. He didn't get assaulted. But yeah, they should definitely sue here because I'm trying to figure out, why was he still arrested and charged?
Well, just like Pastor Jennings said, one of the statements they made was, you talk too much. You're talking too much.
Right.
So it sounds almost as in, okay, you know what? Now you've made us mad, so now we're going to make you pay for that.
Right.
Even though the woman came over and said, no, he's good, I know him, that was a mistake. They're like, we don't care, he's pissed us off now, so he's going to have to pay some consequences for that, unfortunately. Now, we're going to have to go over to the next story, which is even more, I'm just going to get into it. It's tragic. In Texas, a black man is paralyzed from the chest down. Christopher Shaw's attorney says that a Beaumont police officer flipped him into the air and then body slammed him head first on a concrete floor. We are joined by Christopher Shaw's attorney, Chance Lynch. Mr. Lynch, how did Christopher end up in this situation?
Well, first, good evening to you, and thank you for having me on and taking an interest in this matter. It is extremely sad. Christopher Shaw is 41 years old, and last June, at that point when he was found in the road needing medical attention, the Beaumont police officer, James Gillen, arrived, and upon his arrival, arrested Mr. Shaw for public intoxication. Mr. Shaw was able to identify himself, speak and say who he was and where he was from, and he was still placed in arrest with his hands behind his back, handcuffed behind his back and placed into the patrol car. Once he was arrested, he was taken to Baptist Hospital, and there they completed a very brief evaluation to see if he was cleared to be able to be booked inside of the Jefferson County Jail. Subsequently, they cleared him. He arrived at the Jefferson County Jail, and once he was taken inside the bookend area by Officer Gillen, the surveillance video inside that bookend area showed where Mr. Shaw was placed against a half-glass wall with officer and deputies from the Jefferson County Jail on each side of him and in front of him, while the arresting officer, James Gillen, walked about. There was apparently exchange of words, and you can see on the video where the officer threw what he was holding to the side, and he snatched Mr. Shaw out of the care, custody, and control of those deputies. He placed him in, it appeared to be almost like a chokehold, and flipped him over in the air, causing him to land on his head. When we saw that video, we thought that Mr. Shaw had died. His body went limp, and he stayed there in that position. And we saw blood coming from his head due to a laceration with him hitting his head on that concrete floor. Officer Gillen also fell on top of him. So Mr. Shaw was about half his size, flipped over in the air again with his hands cuffed behind his back, unable to control the fall or to break the fall or even brace himself. And the officer fell on top of him, causing a laceration on his head. He stayed unconscious for a number of seconds or minutes. They called the ambulance. They took him back to Baptist Hospital, and the officer who assaulted him, or the officer who flipped him over, should I say, let me correct myself, the officer who flipped him over, that's the best terminology to use. He was the one who was his spokesperson for the medical provision that he needed and the medical treatment. He spoke on behalf of Mr. Shaw. After a very brief evaluation from the medical staff there, he was released to go back to Jefferson County Jail. When he arrived back at Jefferson County Jail, on the surveillance video, you will see that Mr. Shaw is accompanied by the arresting officer and an assisting officer. One of those officers is shown literally holding up Mr. Shaw's legs because Mr. Shaw was not able to control his extremities. He was holding up his legs so his legs would not drag the ground. Once he got inside the bookend area, you'll see that Mr. Shaw was sitting in a bizarre fashion, abnormal to any person who was sitting in a wheelchair, unable to lift his head and control his extremities even the more. In fact, staff from the Jefferson County Jail had to hold up his body so that they could change him out into prison and jail attire. He was placed into a cell where he subsequently ended up on the floor, and he repeatedly asked for medical attention while the staff in the jail and court health, one of the nurses looked at him and simply said, "I'm not going to help you until you help yourself." His breathing became labored and he almost died. Mr. Shaw states that his breathing became labored and he told the nurse on staff who refused to help him that he was going to die on her watch. Here's the thing, Mr. Shaw laid there on that floor unable to move for more than 18 and 19 hours in his own feces and his own urine. And finally, the ambulance was called. He was taken to St. Christopher's Hospital where they did an evaluation and discovered that Mr. Shaw's spine had been severed in several places, and he was paralyzed from the chest down. To date, he still cannot stand. He cannot walk. He's in need of consistent assistance. He cannot bathe and eat on his own. Mr. Shaw's life has been completely changed. A man who used to walk to work, who walked inside of the Jefferson County Jail, is now having to be wheeled around in a wheelchair.
The video that you referenced, has that been released?
It has not. We have asked for the release of that video. The sheriff, Zena Stevens, called in the Texas Rangers to investigate the behavior of that Beaumont police officer once she saw the video. The Texas Rangers completed their investigation, and our request was submitted to the Texas Attorney General's office. Their office has stated that the disclosure is not permissive because it would show the inside of that bookend area. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have not looked at the sheriff's website, but I'm told by my co-counsel that the same bookend area that they are protecting, saying that it could possibly be a security risk, is the same bookend area that shows the pictures on the public website. So we are uncertain as to why they will not release this video. It does not show any particular exit that I would suggest, that would cause a security threat to the jail or to the sheriff's office. However, they are still refusing to release this video to the public.
In one of the articles that I read, it said that officers say that Shaw was inside the booking area and he became aggressive, using physical force to push the officers, according to this probable cause affidavit, which led to him being body slammed. Can you explain more about the situation and how they can make that argument? He's handcuffed. Even if he were pushing other officers, he is still handcuffed. So kind of explain if they even have legal grounds to make that statement.
You know, I hate to use secular vernacular phrases, but make it make sense. You know, how does that make sense when he is arrested for public intoxication? There is an expectation that one, as a former assistant district attorney who has prosecuted these cases, and I served as a criminal defense attorney, there is a presumption that there will be aggressive behavior by one who is arrested for public intoxication. But the narrative does not change based off of just that affidavit. The facts remain the same. He was surrounded on each side, on his left side, his right side, and in front of him by deputy correctional officers of the Jefferson County Jail. This officer snatched him out of the care and control and custody of these deputies. This is what the surveillance video shows. What puzzles me is that I believe, and I'm not certain, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, that there was an affidavit by the arresting officer who flipped him, causing the breaking in his neck and his spine. But why didn't they show the video? Why didn't they show the video to this grand jury for them to be able to see it themselves, instead of taking only the sworn testimony of this police officer, whose police chief has publicly said, Jimmy Singletary, that he stands by his man, that he's sad that Mr. Shaw is paralyzed and he cannot walk and the quality of his life has changed, but he stands by his guy and he believes that he was doing his job. Now, I don't understand how that is not excessive, and that's why we filed a federal lawsuit, because we believe that it was excessive force indeed for him to take this man whose hands were cuffed behind his back, who posed no imminent threat, harm, or danger, still surrounded by 3 officers, not including the voluminous amount of staff that was still in that area. But he was directly surrounded by 3 jail officers, and yet this officer thought that it was okay to snatch him out of their care and control and custody and flip him in the air, breaking his neck. I can't make it make sense. I've only seen the video. And for the police chief to make that statement, that's why we're saying release the video. And we'll be able to get it without subpoena power and the phase of discovery. But we still believe that the public should see what they did to Mr. Shaw.
And our producers have the website of this facility to kind of show this is the corrections facility being displayed on the screen right here. And this is one of the intake sections that you were referencing.
That is in fact the intake section that we saw. If you see where that counter is to the right, it has changed just maybe a tad bit. Maybe the counter has changed. But if I'm not mistaken, that is the exact wall to the left where you'll see that is half glass. It's a window that looks into like a holding area where Mr. Shaw's back was against the wall. That's what we saw on that surveillance video, that his back was against the wall and there were officers on each side of him and in front of him. And that's when the arresting officer, James Gillen, ripped him out of their care and control and flipped him over in the air, and he landed on that floor.
Let's get a full screen of that hallway that we just saw there. So according to the police department, in this hallway, they cannot release the footage because of security concerns, but you have a picture bright as day of the hallway. What is the difference between having a photo and the video of the same thing you posted on your website?
I could not have said it any better. That is the exact argument, and that is exactly how we view their position. To us, it just doesn't make sense, and I can't make it make sense when we are literally watching and seeing right now the same area where Mr. Shaw was, but yet they won't release the video because they say it's a possible security breach.
My last question, and then I'm going to take it over to the panel. How is he doing mentally and emotionally? I can't imagine how he's feeling or what he's thinking or going through, but can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen or some of the things that he may have told you about how he's feeling?
I'm fortunate to have practiced law at this point for almost 14, 15 years, and Mr. Shaw is one of the nicest gentlemen that you'll ever want to meet. His humility is impressive. He is strong. He is still encouraging. He still holds his head up, and he has a lot of difficult days. As you can imagine, being a young man at 40 years old and your mobility being stripped from you. His daughter was pregnant when it happened. She has since given born to his grandbaby. He cannot actively play with his grandchild because of his condition, but yet he remains hopeful. He remains hopeful that justice will be found in this case, that we will do everything that we can for him so that this does not happen to anyone else. And he is hopeful that and prayerful that the ultimate physician will heal his body, and that God will heal his body, and at some point one day he prays that he'll be able to walk again, and we join him in that prayer, hoping that one day he will. The reality is he still cannot, and it's caused by the behavior and the misbehavior of an officer who took an oath to protect and serve, but yet caused this damage to his body.
Let's bring our panel in. Let's start off with Xavier. What are your thoughts? I'm getting goosebumps just hearing this. Xavier, what are your thoughts?
Attorney Lynch, thank you for showing up and letting us know what's going on with the case and standing up for the rights of those that have been treated unfairly by the system. My question is, has it been a medical determination as to the 18 to 19 hours that he was left injured, and what the impact would have been at some point from his initial injury when he was flipped on his head like it was some WWE match? And then secondly, what is the the long-term implications in terms of how soon he can get to walking. Will he ever walk again? The prognosis, any physical therapy, the amount of time and hours it will take and money it will take to be able to potentially bring him back whole again.
I appreciate that, and thank you for your question. I'm going to have to curtail my answer, and I want to answer your question, but I do want to curtail my response because we do have federal litigation that's pending. And as you know, once litigation begins, I have to be very limited on what I say going forward. I will say that he has undergone a number of operations there at St. Christopher's, and he has not had the financial stability or ability to be able to have ongoing treatment for his physical therapy. As a result of that, and his inability to provide that, and a lack of coverage to be able to provide the adequate medical attention, you can imagine the impact it has had on his body. The nerve damage, the loss of body mass and muscle mass that he has lost. I cannot speak at this moment based on the opinion of his physicians, but I do anticipate that that will become a part of our pleadings and the discovery as we go forward. I can tell you, based off of the information that we received from Jefferson County Jail, that he stayed in that cell for approximately 18 plus hours. And Mr. Shaw, his recollection is impeccable to be able to explain his request that he made to the core health professionals who failed and refused to give him that proper treatment. That I can say that once the ambulance was called after the 18 plus hours, we're told that the ambulance driver who came inside to load his body up on the gurney and take him out, once they did a brief evaluation, they stated that his body was extremely swollen. Now, I'm not a physician. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a Jewish doctor. So that is not, that's not my wheelhouse. But common sense is very clear, even though it's not always common, that when you have an injury to your spine, the quicker you get medical attention to alleviate the possibility of swelling, gives a possibility of a quicker recovery. Mr. Shaw was not given that. Though he asked for medical attention, they failed to do it. And wherein he could have received adequate medical attention, they chose not to call the ambulance to get him to the hospital based on his request. And he stayed there swelling and swelling until 18 plus hours later, they were called in and he was taken into surgery.
Kelly, what are your thoughts, or do you have any questions?
My thoughts are all over the place just because this is absolutely yet another tragedy. My heart goes out to him and his family, my prayers as well. But my question to you is, as a community, given that this man has lost his livelihood, what has been done and what can be done as outside of legal things and lawsuits and the like? But has there been a GoFundMe? Has there been any source of income that this man can rely on in order to have some semblance of a livelihood?
I appreciate that question, and I'm grateful for activists like Dr. William Barber with the Poor People's Campaign and Repairers of the Breach, the local NAACP, Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Rainbow Push Coalition, their leadership and their activism in this matter. They have taken an interest in Mr. Shaw's matter, and just last week held a joint press conference with our legal team to bring awareness to the Beaumont community so that they are aware of what happened and the status of Mr. Shaw. Those activists have also privately, in their own way, reached out to Mr. Shaw to be able to provide some type of support other than those in his immediate family. Mr. Shaw and our team are in discussions now of the possibility of establishing a GoFundMe to be able to meet his daily needs. He cannot work. And going forward, we anticipate that he will need a caretaker around the clock. One of the things that Mr. Shaw has stated is that even with his difficulty in eating, he needs assistance to be able to fix his food and to actually feed himself. And so we can project that his needs going forward, I mean, he's still a young man, that he's going to have a number of needs, and any financial support is going to be, completely appreciated and needed. Those in the community to join with the local NAACP. The local NAACP right now is led by Michael Cooper, a local pastor. Candace Matthews with the Rainbow Push Coalition, who governs that area for the Reverend Jesse Jackson. She's taken an interest in being able to help him as well. Dick Gregory and Voice for the People with Ricky Jason has taken an interest in Mr. Shaw. They've been helping him. I know that between Mr. Jason and Pastor Cooper, they've worked to get him a wheelchair, because the wheelchair that he had was just run down and insufficient. And again, the Poor People's Campaign and the Repairers of the Breach have started meeting weekly to have a weekly prayer meeting to bring awareness to that situation, so that the citizens in Beaumont will not just cause this to just be swept under the rug, but to really take an active role in holding that police chief, that police officer, and this police department accountable for what has happened to Mr. Shaw.
Michael, we haven't heard from you yet. What are your thoughts?
This is, once again, another crazy story. I had a question for Attorney Lynch. Thanks for coming on today. Has the Beaumont Police Department given any explanation of why Mr. Shaw laid in his cell for more than 18 hours, apparently bleeding, and he was in the cell to the point he has to go to the bathroom? They wouldn't let him go to the bathroom. He uses the bathroom on himself. Have they given any explanation of why he was in the cell that long and denied medical attention?
There has not been an explanation provided by the Jefferson County Jail. And I want to make sure that I'm clear. It was the Beaumont police officer, James Gillen, who flipped him over and caused him to have those injuries. But he was placed in the Jefferson County Jail.
Jefferson County Jail.
Of the elected sheriff. We have not received any correspondence from the sheriff's office to give us any explanation as to why he was there for 18 plus hours. As you know, we filed a federal lawsuit against Core Health, who was the medical provider that was contracted with the Jefferson County Jail to provide medical treatment to its inmates. That Core Health, that entity, had the nurses and the staff there who were required to attend to his needs, but yet refused to help Mr. Shaw and said, "I'm not going to help you until you help yourself." The sheriff and the sheriff's representative has not provided us an explanation as to why Mr. Shaw was left lying on that floor in his own feces and urine for 18 plus hours.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Well, you know, Attorney Lynch, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And again, my prayers go out to your client and his family as well. I'm hoping that he will get that recovery that he's hoping for, so he will be able to walk again. But please keep us up to date on how this progresses, because I know our viewers will love to know, what goes further after our interview with you. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to take it to a break. Right now, you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. We'll be right back. So don't.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
On a next A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, our kids are going back to school. After 2 years of disruption, thanks to COVID, are we ready? How to help them to prepare, and what are the warning signs that our children are showing us? Social, emotional, physical. All of these stressors and anxieties will be impacting our children. They'll be facing new challenges, anxieties, and emotions, and the adults in their lives need to figure out how to pull themselves together so that our kids will be able to do the same. Adults need to be paying closer attention now more so than ever.
This generation who feels like they're unguided,
We need to provide that guidance. That's next on A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, here at Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Chrisette Michelle.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
A redacted version of the Mar-a-Lago search warrant affidavit was released today, and this affidavit, which was filed by the Justice Department, sought a warrant to search the former president Donald Trump's estate earlier this month. Well, national security and foreign policy expert Dr. Nola Haynes from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service is joining us now to discuss what's in the affidavit. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is an important day.
Absolutely, it really is. Now, for my first question for you, this affidavit totaled 32 pages with an attachment. Can you give us some highlights, some things that stood out to you the most?
Well, the very first sentence, you know, when you first read the document, it says that this is a criminal investigation. And so that takes you aback a bit. It doesn't highlight specifically who's being investigated, but it takes off the table any speculation that it is an investigation. Although Attorney General Merrick Garland said that it was, a lot of people still were kind of very confused about what he meant. And I think the affidavit today kind of spelled it out in very stark detail. Exactly, the government is conducting a criminal investigation. So that kind of sets the tone at the level of seriousness that this is. We still do not know if this is just going to be about retrieving documents or if someone will actually be charged, or multiple people, perhaps. We do not know that yet. The second thing that stood out to me was regarding the Presidential Records Act. And there's been a lot of conversation about what is protected, what can the president classify, declassify. So the president has far-reaching powers in terms of what the president can declassify. But what I found very interesting in part two of when it talked about the PRA particularly, it said that while certain documentations are absolutely to the discretion of the president and presidential aides, what's not discretionary, you know, what is not debatable are records from other agencies. And while, you know, that may not seem like something that's really bombastic, that's very important because this is what the bulk of this hinges on, especially when we're talking about commentary from other people who are trying to make this seem like this is not a major issue, that it's not a matter of national security. And I want to dispel any myths right now. This is absolutely serious. This is a major issue for national security. People have gone to jail and received large fines for less. There are 3 cases that I can think of regarding improper handling of documents, where someone received 5 years, someone received 9 years. General Petraeus, for a misdemeanor version of what this affidavit spelled out, got 2 years probation and a $100,000 fine. And that was a misdemeanor version of what we saw today in the affidavit.
So, and I want to kind of piggyback off of what you just said. Within the 32 pages, there was a letter written on May 25th that was signed by the former president's attorney that outlined the authorities that he had for presidential records. So can you tell me a little bit more about this letter and what authority they are quoting that he had to have these documents?
Well, you know, I'm definitely not a lawyer, so I don't want to get into the kind of legal argumentation around that. But the best of my ability, what I'm able to figure out is this is a lot of perhaps throwing spaghetti at the wall. And I think it kind of goes back to my earlier statement that I definitely do want people to understand that, yes, the president has far-reaching powers of what he, and hopefully one day she, can declassify, right? But this is not one of those cases. And that's the thing that we need to understand. While his legal team is hired to present a particular argument to make it seem as though their client is clear from any wrongdoing, from what I read today in the affidavit, people that I spoke to, and in my own personal knowledge about the treatment of classified documents, especially when we're talking about top secret SCI documents, top secret, secret compartmented information. And when we are talking about other types of very, very high top tier security clearances. And the one thing that I want to bring up, especially in the 25 boxes that were marked top secret, and they were all clearly marked, from what I understand, classified. And there were different levels of classification within those 25, within those 25 documents. That when we are talking about defense, when we are talking about intelligence, that is a different level of classification. A lot of that information cannot leave the place in which you're being read into. You know, when we're talking about potential assets around the world, we are talking about far-reaching foreign policy situations. We are talking about potential assets that are compromised, information that's compromised. We do not know what's been compromised. We do not know what other people may know. What we do know is that Mar-a-Lago wasn't exactly a bastion of security. Now that we do know, right? And that is a problem because we are talking about top secret documents and we have no idea what other people had access to in a situation that was not heavily secure.
As a veteran who had a top secret clearance when I was serving, you definitely cannot take the documents outside of certain said facilities. And it's beat into your brain that if you do, you're going to jail for a very, very, very long time. I mean, Reality Winner is a perfect example of that. And so I'm going to get off my soapbox. But yes, you make some very valid points. And let's just see where this goes. Let's take it over to our panelists and see what their thoughts are. Let's kick it off with Kelly.
Hi. This is just very interesting to me because, like you said, people have gone to jail for less. And aside from him being a white man and the rules simply not applying to one over the other in many instances, including this one, but we're also talking about a former president of the United States. This is unprecedented. Right? And not only are we talking about a former POTUS, we're talking about a former POTUS who now has a cult underneath him, right? Who, and in that cult contain some people of significant power. So I guess my question to you is, I understand you're not an attorney, but just give me your thoughts on what does it matter when, should he go to jail, if he goes to jail, what does that mean for the rest of those who were underneath him, who also had those documents, who may or may not go to jail?
Well, like I said, I don't think that one person here is going to catch some heat regarding this because, you know, to get the documents out of the White House, that took assistance, that took help. Right. So none of this the former president could have arranged on his own. So we do not know who those actors are. And we do know that Kash Patel was also named in the affidavit. So we do not know what his exposure is. Right. So we're just learning information. And I think, you know, for people who want this to be tidied up overnight, that's not going to be the case. You know, we've definitely seen evidence that Attorney General Merrick Garland takes his time. You know, he's methodical. And in a situation when you're talking about a former president who has such a devoted following and who has they have openly committed to, you know, violence, you know, basically trying to bully the rest of the country and anyone else who wants to see the former president held any level of accountability, that they will be violent. So there's a lot at stake. And I think that he's definitely going to take his time here. So we still do not know who else is implicated in this situation yet. I think, you know, we will continue to see as this unfolds.
Michael, what are your thoughts or questions?
Well, you know, I've been following this from day one, and even going back to January 2017, when the Trader-in-Chief was sworn into office. I said he's the first Russian president of the United States. I still think I'm going to be proven right on that. But when we talk about his attorney, Christina Bobb, who in June signed off on a document stating that the FBI had gotten back all of the classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, because the 184 documents that was talked about in the affidavit released today, that's what the FBI got in January. That's what they got in January. So what liability, legal liability, does his attorney, Christina Bobb, have? Because it appears that either she lied or either somebody lied to her, because there was still more classified documents. They got August 8th, they got 20 boxes of classified documents when they served the search warrant August 8th. So what legal liability could she be facing?
Well, again, I definitely do not want to wade into the waters of legalese. That's Mr. Pope's job to do that. But what I will say is I have been amazed. The people that have been, they put their careers on the line for Trump. I don't know that level of magnetism that he has, that he appeals to a certain type of personality. It doesn't appeal to me. So in a way, I don't get it. But, he appeals to certain people so much so that they are willing to abandon what they truly believe in, and they are willing to put their careers on the line. And especially for a lot of lawyers that have been in the Trump orbit over the years, I just simply do not understand why you would want to put your credentials in jeopardy. Those degrees cost a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. You pass the bar and you're willing to risk all of that. So I do not know legally what her exposure is. From what I understand, there could be some. But, again, I think by the time all this is over, there will be quite a few people that are susceptible to some level of exposure.
All right, thanks.
Xavier, do you have any questions for Dr. Haynes?
Sure. Dr. Nola Haynes, thank you for providing your expertise in this space, one of the few African-American women in the national security space. So flowers given over to you, bring your expertise in all the different platforms that you are a part of. My question for you, Dr. Haynes, is some of the documents that were retrieved contain handwritten notes by Mr. Trump. And what does that potentially say about some of the criticism in terms of those on the right? And these are just documents, but when handwritten notes on these particular documents give a window that maybe something has been done with them. And so what if maybe you've seen, or maybe need to see more of, in terms of the information that was provided today moving forward?
Well, thank you so much for that question. That's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about. And what's so striking to me is notoriously the former president was known for not even reading the public daily brief. And yet you have this image of him trifling through all of these documents, probably with his fingerprints on them. I mean, if his signature was available, like his notes were available, that definitely tells me that he actually had the time to sit down and go through these documents, which kind of infers that there was some level of value that he saw in these documents, because we also know that the former president is largely transactional. So what was it that he identified in these documents, or what level of interest that he had in these documents that he didn't even have in the daily in the public, in the daily brief? So that's a question that's been rolling around in my mind, and it's going to be very interesting if some level of fingerprint analysis is done, on all of these documents, to see who did in fact, who handled these documents. I think that once we get to the end of this is going to be quite a few people are going to be involved. Just like with the January 6th situation, people are constantly coming out of the woodwork, names you didn't hear about before, or names that, we weren't paying attention to have, played some role. And I think that it's probably going to be something very similar to this situation. But I do think that that's a very interesting part of all of this, considering we had a president that was notoriously uninterested in information, but here he is very interested in this information. So I'm waiting with bated breath to see where all of this goes.
Wow, you made a very good point there, Dr. Haynes. Wow. But on that note, we do have to take it to a break. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your perspective on the redacted affidavit that was released today. For those of you just now tuning in, or even if you aren't and you've been watching this whole time, I'm going to remind you what show you're watching because it's Roland's show and it's a great show. So you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on Black Star Network. We'll be right back. Don't you go anywhere.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, rates $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
I challenge myself as an artist and challenge knowing that I'm going to challenge the audience, right? So oftentimes you come into this business off of one project where everybody's like, ooh, you stand out. Okay, for me it was Barbershop, Ricky, da-da-da-da-da-da. Ricky was nothing like me growing up, right? Nothing like me growing up. But if that's people's first experience with you, right, as an audience member, they tend to think that's the real you, right? So, you know, for me, after that, I got a whole bunch of offers to play roles just like Ricky, right? This Tupac-esque type of thug, right? And I just said no over and over again. And then you keep trying to do other things. Then I went through a series of romantic movies and romantic leads, and you know, I always try to bring some sort of gravitas to those roles. And then it was like, okay, well, but before I get into all of that, let me hit y'all with, you know, For Color Girls, and, you know, step outside of the realm of, you know, what you expect of me to do as an audience member in terms of being this romantic lead and everything. Because I didn't get into this business to be the romantic lead, you know, that dude. Like, I didn't get into this business. You can get locked in. You can totally get locked in.
Hey, I'm Amber Stevens-West.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
A 14-year-old from Atlanta, Georgia, has been missing since July 15, 2022. Lamelia Buchanan is 5'6", weighs 160 pounds with black hair and brown eyes. Now, anyone with any information about Lamelia Buchanan should call the City of South Fulton Police Department at 470-809-7300. Again, that's 470-809-7300. Now, the Black Mississippi FedEx driver who said that a white father and son duo chased and shot at him while trying to make a delivery says that he received a letter from a Louisiana white supremacist threatening to kill him. DeMontario Gibson provided the letter to the Mississippi Free Press on August 23, 2022, after forwarding it to the FBI. And in this letter, they identified the individual who made the death threat against him by name. They mentioned his address in Louisiana, and they even described him as, quote, the head of a white supremacy group based in the Shreveport area. Now, at one of the group meetings, this individual allegedly was saying, quote, all kinds of racist rants and how they need to get the race war going. The letter continues. He was telling the people that he wants to personally kill Gibson and that he won't miss this time, unlike the other person that missed. Now, Gregory Chase and his son, Brandon, face aggravated assault and conspiracy charges. This case has not been presented before a grand jury yet, but Gibson and his attorney are pushing for them to be charged with a hate crime. A federal jury convicted a white Florida man on hate crime charges for attempting to run a black man off the road. Jordan Leahy was driving drunk when he sideswiped a black man's vehicle. He gave a Nazi sign out the window and then pretended to shoot at his car. He then approached the man and punched him while his girlfriend and daughter were in the car. He later admitted to telling people that they needed to control black people and intended to commit a mass shooting. Leahy could spend 10 years in prison, have 3 years of supervised release, and pay a fine of up to $250,000. Now, in Florida State Attorney Andrew Warren will soon be heading to court to fight to get his job back after he was suspended by Ron DeSantis earlier this month. Now, the timetable is set for Warren's lawsuit against DeSantis, and the plan is to complete all paperwork and hearings by September 20th, with a ruling expected from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District Court of Florida soon afterwards. Now, Warren is a twice duly elected state attorney for Tampa and Hillsborough County, Florida, and DeSantis signed an order suspending him on August 4th, and Warren filed a lawsuit to challenge that suspension on August 17th. Warren claims that DeSantis' order violated his First Amendment right to free speech under the U.S. Constitution and exceeded DeSantis' authority as governor under Florida law. It asked the judge to compel the governor to rescind the illegal order, which would restore Warren to his office. On that note, we are going to take it to a quick break. Don't go anywhere. This is Black Star Network and Roland Martin Unfiltered.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys. This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Hey, I'm Arnez J. Black TV does matter, dang it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
Stay woke.
Many high school seniors are still trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. Well, one Maryland teen knew what she wanted her junior year and spent the entire summer making her dreams come true. Ava Lewis starts her last year of high school as the youngest JROTC female private pilot license holder. What a feat. This is so amazing. Now, Ava received a $22,500 scholarship from the Air Force Junior ROTC Flight Academy to earn her private pilot certificate at an accredited aviation university. She is one of 200 cadets from around the world to earn a private pilot certificate from Indiana's Wesleyan University. Ava joins us right now from Baltimore. Hi, Ava. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. You are such an inspiration. I love your story. Welcome to the show. I actually have a few questions for you about this huge accomplishment. Has it set in yet? How do you feel about this?
It hasn't really set in yet. I guess it has, but I feel really good, especially being home now. I'm glad it's over, but I'm excited to do more.
And so piggybacking off of that, what more do you hope to do? Because my understanding is you want to help some other students be able to have the opportunity that you had as well.
Of course. So only a couple of cadets from my school applied for this scholarship, and I was the only one to get in. So now that I have knowledge of the entire process, I'm hoping to go back and help more cadets get in, especially the ones that tried last year. And then hopefully anyone else who's also interested this year.
So give us your backstory. What made you interested in wanting to fly? And I want to add to our viewers that are just now watching, she was getting her driver's license today. So the fact that she's able to fly, she has a pilot's license, but not her driver's license, is so fascinating. So tell me, what got you into this and got you interested in wanting to become a pilot?
So I've always liked the idea of flying, but I never really realized how the process of becoming a pilot worked. So when the opportunity was presented to me in class, they kind of presented it as okay, we can get you your license in 8 weeks. We can make it straightforward. It won't be easy, but we can do this for you if you get the scholarship. So from that, also, it would be free. So from that, I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. Flying is really fun. I like flying in the airline plane, so why not try this? So, of course, I applied, and now I'm here.
Was there any moments where you were ever scared, like when you were flying, like maybe when you first flew, or tell us a little bit about that?
So I don't think I was ever scared. It's more of when you're up in a plane, you kind of don't trust the fact that you're actually flying, especially in the small Cessnas that I was flying. I was never scared, just didn't trust the plane. So when I actually did my flight training, there were definitely times where I was scared. A lot of the flight training is teaching you how to prevent yourself from doing something wrong. So of course you practice stalls so you can recover, you practice emergencies, and a lot of those procedures were a little scary, especially stalling, but I did learn to get over my fears. We did it a lot, did a lot of practice, and over the course of the 8 weeks, I learned to build confidence, and now I think I'm a little more confident. I'm definitely not afraid anymore.
So tell me, how does it feel? Because I know when I got my driver's license at 15, and I had a motorcycle license as well, and I was super excited. I was the only kid in my high school driving a motorcycle, right? How does it feel for you to say, well, actually, I have a pilot license before you ever even got your driver's license? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it's just kind of funny having the pilot's license before the driver's license. And I don't know, I like the idea of being able to take my friends up and also family, my teachers, and showing them what I trained for in the past 8 weeks. But other than that, it's just pretty cool.
And so what's next for you other than obviously graduating high school?
So next, in the near future, hopefully I can earn more ratings with the pilot's license and gain experience. And then after high school, I'm looking to either do Air Force Academy or ROTC, looking for a few scholarships there. And then after that, with both programs, I'll be enlisted into the Air Force right after college. And then from there, I'm hoping to fly their planes in the Air Force. And in the far future, maybe join the airlines.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, if you ever need any advice, I was in the Air Force. I didn't get to fly planes, but I did get to dangle out of back of a couple of C-130s, so that was pretty fun. But anyways, we're going to bring in our panel because I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you. I mean, you are a trailblazer right now. Let's go on ahead and bring our panelists in, and let's kick it off with Kelly.
Hi, Ava. As someone who knows plenty of people who went to Poly, I know they are over the moon, overjoyed for you because that whole Poly connection is wild. You did mention what you want to do after this, next steps, but are there any little milestones along the way that you would hope to accomplish, such as, flying to a certain point or doing some type of trick in the air? What are some of your bucket lists now that you have your pilot's license?
So I know I have a few ideas of what I like to do. I know the first trip that I'd like to do is take my mom and other family members down to Ocean City. It would be a really short cross country, probably less than an hour, like 45 minutes. But being able to do that, taking people who isn't my CFI out somewhere that's not home in a plane is probably the first big accomplishment. Landing and taking off in a different spot. And then something I would like to do in the air is probably more solo cross countries, taking myself places. And then a huge goal is probably landing, like taking off and landing at every single state. That would be really fun, having cross countries everywhere.
Having a license like that, what makes it the sky's the limit, right? No pun intended. All right, so let's have our other panelists jump on in. Xavier, you have any questions?
Ava, congratulations on this big accomplishment and basically being a young trailblazer. I have a 13-year-old son, Xavier II. He wants to get into aeronautical engineering, maybe wants to also fly planes as well. He's 13. How early can he get into some of the programs that you started? Is it any time that's too early to go through some of the programs to be able to take a steps along the way? And what advice would you give for the 7th and 8th graders going into high school about the path they can take to be able to get where you are right now?
Okay, so about the programs, there's not too much I know about any programs that I did at a young age, but I do know you can start your flight training or have your student pilot certificate at 14 years old, so you can start training pretty young. And then any advice, I'd say just go up there and do it. So if you want to do a discovery flight, I'd say just whenever you get the chance, go up there, experience it, see if you truly like it. And then if you're old enough and you have your student pilot's license, just schedule flights here and then, or schedule just fun flights. I know some airports, they do kind of tour flights. You fly around the area, things like that. Anything that you can do to get your hands on, I would say go ahead and do.
Thanks, Ava.
Now, I have a quick question. What do you have to do to keep your skills up now that you have that? Do you have to fly so many hours every week, every month? And how does that, I guess, mesh with your now high school schedule?
So I guess per the FAA, I technically don't have to fly too much. I know if I want to carry passengers, I have to do 3 takeoff and landings every 90 days, and then I have to have a flight review every 2 years. But things like that, that's just the bare minimum. I'm hoping to be able to fly at least once a month. There's nothing that I have to do, but it's more so I'd like to do it so that I feel safe and my passengers feel safe in the plane.
That's very fair. Michael, you have any questions or comments?
Well, look, Ava, congratulations. You're an inspiration. You're Black girl magic. One question I had is, how many hours did you have to fly? How many hours were you required to fly before you could get your private pilot's license? And also, what was the most challenging thing going through the 8-week academy? What was the most challenging thing to learn or obstacle to overcome in getting your license?
Okay, so I know the bare minimum with the program I did to, I guess, do your check ride. So before you could take your final test, you needed 35 hours. I believe I had 41 hours when I took my test. So the minimum is 35. And then I guess the hardest part, there were a lot of, I guess, difficult things. I know a lot of the ground school was really difficult, as in we'd have to, even if you didn't understand a certain topic, there was no way you could get around it. There's no way you could say, okay, I'm just going to do this later. You only have 8 weeks. So you and other cadets, you would just cram all this stuff into your head. And I guess, of course, like I said, ground school was the hardest part. Flying the plane, of course, you can take off. You can kind of land pretty simply. Doing the maneuvers isn't too bad once you're up there and once you do it a few times. But actually learning the ground school, learning how the engine works, learning the principles of flight, learning everything about the airspace, all of that in such a short period of time, and then knowing that you have to take a written test on it was probably the hardest part.
All right, thank you. Congratulations.
So I spoke to your mom, and of course she was singing your praises. She's so proud of you. But one of the things that she had mentioned was that you are a part of a nonprofit called ETA, or Empowerment Through Aviation. And she said that you wanted to become a staff member, a part of this organization. So one, tell everyone about this organization, how you got involved, and what you hope to accomplish in this nonprofit.
So ETA, I guess they partnered with Poly to get more females into aviation. So it was 5 cadets, including me. We went to the airport and we did 5 hours of just introductory flights. It's kind of like a discovery flight, but 5 hours instead of 30 minutes. So ETA has 3 phases. The first phase, I believe, is middle school. It's kind of just more of a ground school, getting kids, not cadets yet, into aviation, learning about how it works, and then taking them up on the discovery flight and getting their hands on just a little bit, just to pique interest. Then phase 2, which is what I and the 5 other cadets did, is, like I said, the 5 hours. This is getting hands-on, showing them kind of the maneuvers you have to know to get your private pilot's license, and then, letting them attempt landings, letting them do takeoffs, kind of just like getting you used to the plane. You get past the phase of, okay, I don't like the plane, to, okay, I think I can fly this. And then phase 3 is having cadets actually go through the process of getting their license over the course of, I guess, 1 or 2 years. Kind of a slow process, but they'll be there the whole way. So what I want to do is, since I have my license, I want to be able to either maybe do the middle school flights, their discovery flights, take up a middle schooler, show them around, or just show any of the cadets in phase 2 what it's like to fly. Just anywhere they need help, I want to join them. And maybe I can help with ground school since I'm doing that, and that would be good to keep my currency up as well, since I know that I have to remember and maintain all of the information I learn. So anything along those lines that they need help with, I definitely want to do.
And so why is it important? Because you said specifically this program was looking to recruit females. And I know I take a lot of flights, and, all the time I see pilots, they're usually men, and then the flight attendants are the women. So why do you feel that this is important to specifically reach out to females and get them interested in wanting to get their pilot license?
I think it's just like anything else. It's better to have a more diverse community, and just having or giving females the opportunity to do these bigger things, and having, more role models who are females for even younger people who want to do this, but maybe they feel like maybe they can't. Just having more role models of females in the community would be really good. And just overall, I wouldn't say better, but, just kind of better.
Well, you're doing it the right way, because guess what? Whether you realize it or not, you're one of those role models. So you're going to have little girls looking up to you going, I want to be just like her. And let that sit for a second. It's beautiful, right? So on that note, thank you so much for joining us. I want to follow your story and see where you land in the next couple of years. So I hope we can keep in touch. Congratulations again, and thank you for joining us. For those just now tuning in, you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. We got to take it to a break, but I promise you we will be right back.
Lost? Does it get better than not parallel parking yourself?
Alexa, ask Smart Feed to feed the dog.
Does it get better than feeding your dog from 50 miles away? Yes, it does. At Buick, we see a future that's even better. Because the life-enhancing innovations you've never even dreamed of, Buick is dreaming of them every day.
Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland. Hey, Black, I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home. You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Hey, I'm Cupid, the maker of the Cupid Shuffle and the Wham Dance.
What's going on? This is Tobias Trevelyan. And if you're ready, you are listening to and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
We have all heard about the teacher shortages here in the U.S., but is there really a teacher shortage? Well, there's a new study that suggests that it's not as bad as we may have believed. According to researchers from Kansas State University and the University of Illinois, understanding teacher shortages has been problematic because of the lack of data. Now, joining us, we have Tan Nguyen, the assistant professor from Kansas State University, who's going to break it down for us and tell us a little bit more. Tan, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell me, what does the data you and your colleagues collected reveal about this teacher shortage?
Oh, sure. So first, like you said, that this is an issue that we're really interested in. But prior to this point, we just haven't had data covering all 50 states plus DC. So what we did, our team, we systematically looked for teacher vacancy data across the United States. And what we found, we estimate that there are about, conservatively, 36,500 vacant positions in the United States, at least for the states that we can find the data for. Now, there are 13 states that we couldn't find any data for instance, California and New York.
Okay, I believe we lost your audio.
Oh.
Okay, we still have you. Okay, just making sure. I thought we lost your audio there. Now, let me ask you. Now, you said there was 13 states. There's other states that you haven't been able to get the data for. From some of the research I've seen, there's specifically 9 states that have the highest rates, and Mississippi is one of those states. According to the data that I found, 68 teachers are missing per 10,000 students, and this was for 2021 to 2022. So in contrast with Utah's vacancy rate, it was less than one per 10,000 students. So why do you think that this is the case, that in Mississippi there's 68 missing for the 10,000 students versus Utah where there's one teacher per 10,000 students?
So one of the things that we have noticed is that there seems to be a cluster of states in the South that seems to have really high raw vacancy, as well as high vacancy numbers like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. So in these states, they have systematically disinvested in public education for a long time now. So that's going to be a part of the issue.
Now, my next question for you is, based on some of the research I've done, currently there is 163,000 underqualified educators, which is about 5% of the force nationally. So teaching without certifications or outside their subject matter area, that's what these people are doing. So what impact can this have if you have so many individuals who are teaching and they don't have these specific certifications to do so?
That's a great question. So people who are underqualified, whether or not they don't have standard certification, or if they're teaching out of subject, we know that these types of teachers are more likely to leave the profession, and they don't necessarily have the content expertise to teach in those specific areas. So, students aren't learning as much. Their turnover rate is going to be higher than other teachers. And then that's going to create this cycle of where, they're going to leave their school and they're going to be replaced by, another novice teacher or another teacher who is underqualified. All right. So then we have this cycle of teacher churn, which is problematic.
And you make a very good point, because I want to say a few weeks ago, it was, I believe in Florida, service members are able, or veterans are able to go and teach and not even really have a certification. And when I heard that, I found that a little concerning, because I'm like, well, I get you're trying to help veterans, and I think it's great. But just like you said, you don't want to have individuals who don't have specific certifications teaching, the students. And so that's why I brought that question up. But on that note, I'd like to bring our panelists in and see if they have any questions for you as well. Let's go on ahead and kick it off with Michael. Michael, do you have any questions for Ton?
Yes, I do. Hey, thanks for coming on today. And I've seen some stories here recently. I saw one on MSNBC dealing with South Lake, Texas, I think it was, and teachers leaving the profession. And one of the reasons why has to do with states that have these new anti-critical race theory laws. And a lot of these laws are very ambiguous. And it causes teachers a lot of fear, uncertainty about what they can actually teach in school when it comes to history and the history of slavery and white supremacy, things like this. Based upon your research, what have you found regarding the anti-critical race theory laws? How does that contribute to this teacher shortage, especially in the 9 states that were outlined in your study?
So, we right now we have those the suggestive evidence that for these states that have these legislation that can tell teacher what they can or cannot teach, or that they cannot teach race about racism or history of racism or social emotional learning or about gender identity. These states, particularly those states in the South, tend to have very high vacancy rate. That tells me that these teachers do not want to teach in these states, even if they are certified there. Right? You think about these legislation makes teachers fearful.
Go ahead. I was just saying Mississippi.
Yeah, like Mississippi and Florida. Like Florida, for instance, right? They have all these legislations now that go through books and randomly choose books to exclude. That makes that's not going to want invite teachers, other people into the profession.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Kelly, do you have any questions for Ton?
Sure. So similar to Michael's question regarding how critical race theory and the like played a role into these vacancies, what do you think about the salary ranges of teachers across the country playing a role into these vacancies, as well as the overcrowding of classrooms playing a role into these vacancies?
So I think that's a great point. So the states where we have found really high vacancy rate or raw vacancy numbers, those states tend to have, a low investment in public education. So, the amount that they spend per student is lower, the salary tends to be lower. And, it's not surprising in some ways that those states are the ones that have experienced very high vacancy number, like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Each of those states have at least 3,000 vacant positions as of last year. And for Florida, that might have increased to, somewhere near 8,000 vacant positions this year.
Xavier, we haven't heard from you yet.
My question is about if those states that you mentioned that are not currently investing in education, and some of the politics in those states are leaning towards people being in classrooms that are not teachers, and considering some of the lax gun laws in those particular states, what does it say for the future of the classroom in states where they're not investing in education and really not concerned with necessarily teachers in the classroom, but maybe sort of indoctrination of a certain level of patriotic type education in those particular states?
So that's a real concern that many of us are having right now, is that, that's going to continue to get worse in some ways for those states. And then you think about like the long-term, future for those states. And you are exactly right that, there are going to be less teachers. There may be less teacher in those states. They're going to be teaching in a very specific way, or paint, the history of America in a specific way. And I think that's going to get worse over time unless, we take some very specific actions and make some hard decisions in terms of how we want to treat teachers, how we want to support teachers, and raise salary and respect for teachers, particularly in those states.
Where does that change start, though, for those teachers? Like, does that start with the schools? Does that start with the parents going and holding meetings to push for this? Does it start with teachers banding together and protesting? Like, where does it start?
I think it has to start with all those parties that you mentioned: parents, families, teachers, policymakers. We know that certain schools have a really hard time attracting teachers, particularly academically disadvantaged schools, rural schools, schools with majority and minority students. We need to have specific policy that target those specific schools in order to bring teachers to those schools. Think about like a sign-up bonus. If you are going to go to teach in a rural area, you get a bonus to go there. Or if you teach in an economically disadvantaged school, then you get a bonus to go there. But without these type of targeted policies, it's hard to see how we're going to change things around. And I think that teachers and parents have a key role to play. We know that teacher strikes can have a positive impact in terms of raising teacher salary, in terms of raising the awareness of what the profession is about.
And I know lots of teachers who, they give from their heart. They're doing this because they love teaching. They love being with students, and they're paying for supplies and everything else out of their own pockets just because that's what they love to do. They're doing it out of love. And so, I believe that a lot of these individuals who are just now, graduating and being able to apply for something like this, they got to have incentives, more incentives than just the love of teaching. You know what I'm saying? Because that only goes so far, but you can love teaching, and if you can't afford your bills, then that's not a great incentive. So I think that's another thing they need to do, is start incentivizing it and start getting high school students interested in it, like Ava, who wants to go teach students how to become pilots. I mean, if you can get students interested in that and maybe pursue that, they have to have more incentives, I believe, but that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're right. Teaching is a noble profession, but just because it's a noble profession and it's a calling doesn't mean that they shouldn't be paid what they're worth. Teachers shouldn't have to have a second job or a third job to make ends meet. All right, they have to have a fair living wage so that that keep them in the middle class. That's sort of the backbone of America and the backbone of our education and our economy. We need to pay teachers what they're worth.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Well, Tan, thank you so much for joining us today and letting everyone know this specific issue and how it can hopefully be resolved. So thank you for joining us today. I also want to thank our panelists who joined us today. We have Kelly, Michael, and Xavier. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show today. On that note, it is Friday night and the show is ending. But that's okay because there's another show coming up on Monday, so make sure you guys are tuning in. And Roland will be back. They made sure that I had to announce that Roland will be back. So I'm sorry, you guys, I won't be here any longer, but I enjoyed being able to fill in for Roland. It's been such an honor working with his team and being able to cover these stories. So everyone have an absolutely great weekend. Love you all. See you all on Monday. I'll be watching along on YouTube like you. Have a good weekend.
talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.